Hi everyone. In our earlier class, we have learned the definition of consideration and we've seen couple of legal rules for a valid consideration. So this was our discussion in our earlier class. So in today's class, we'll just go through other legal rules for valid consideration. Okay. A quick recap of earlier rules. The first one is that the consideration must move at the desire of the promisor, and the second rule is consideration may move from promisee or any other person. For the second rule, we have seen a very popular case, that is Chinnaya versus Ramaya case. In this case law, I'll just give you a quick recap. So an old lady promised her daughter to gift her property. She has written all the will and everything, but this old lady has just given a direction to the daughter to pay annuities to her maternal uncle, that is the old lady's brother. So this was the direction given by this old lady. So this daughter, she stopped paying annuities to maternal uncle. So maternal uncle reached to the court of law, and court of law said giving annuities is the daughter promise, and maternal uncle consideration need not directly come from maternal uncle. The old lady has already gifted property to the daughter. That consideration is sufficient for the daughter to give annuity. So this is a very good example for consideration may move from promisee or any other person. Here the consideration is moving. Here the daughter is promisor, maternal uncle is the promisee, but the consideration is moving from the old lady. Okay, we have seen there may be a stranger to the consideration but not stranger to the contract. So that's this popular case. This is what we have seen, and now we will go to our third legal rule for valid consideration. The third legal rule says consideration can be executed and executory consideration. If you remember, we've seen executed contract and executory contract. Executed contract is something where the contract is performed completely from both the parties. Executory is the contract still needs to be performed in future. Similarly, executed consideration is something which is already given, and executory consideration is something which should be given in future. So the simple concept. Consideration which consists in the performance of an act is said to be executed. When it consists in a promise, it is said to be executory. Consideration consists in the performance of an act. Already the act is performed, then we say it is executed, but consideration which is in a promise is executory. This can be better understood with the help of this example. A pays 5,000 to B, and B promises to deliver to him certain quantity of wheat. A pays 5,000 to B. So A has already paid 5,000. That means from A's perspective, the consideration is executed. That means already paid. But B promises to deliver him to certain quantity of wheat. He promised, but he has not yet delivered that quantity of wheat. He promised that he will deliver the wheat within a 1 month. So in this case, A paying the amount, whereas B is merely making a promise. He is yet to deliver the wheat. So therefore, the consideration paid by A is executed, whereas the consideration promised by B is executory. Got it? Executed is the consideration is already done, whereas in case of executory, it is a promise to be done in future. And from the example itself, we've seen consideration may be present, past, present, or future. We have words has done an act, or has abstained from doing an act, has done. That is the past tense that is given in the example. The words has done or abstained from doing is contained in section 2 subsection D are a recognition of doctrine of past consideration. Okay. So here one important point is, in order to support a promise, a past consideration must move by a previous request. We have always seen the consideration must be at the desire of the promisor. This is the rule that we have learned. It should be at the desire of the promisor. So in order to support a promise, a past consideration which is already done must be moved at the previous request. That request should come from promisor. It is a general principle that consideration is given and accepted in exchange of the promise. Yes, consideration, there is always mutual consideration for a promise. Okay. The consideration, if past consideration, you have already done something in past. In some cases, this may be the motive for a real consideration of a subsequent promise. So in the past, someone has done you some favor. So now you said that I really got a very good favor from you in the past. So I promise I'll pay you rupees 5,000. So this is the promise given by you. So a event or a consideration that you received in a past may be motive for this. The help or favor someone did in the past may be motive for this your original promise of rupees 5,000. Okay. But in the event of services being rendered in the past at the request or the desire of the promiser, the subsequent promise is regarded as an admission that the past consideration was not gratuitous. Service in the past, there are few services that you have received at the request or desire of the promiser, because for the consideration the very definition itself says it is to be done at the desire of the promiser. The subsequent promiser is regarded as an admission that the past consideration was not gratuitous. So when you've received a past help from some person, when you say in return to that help I'll pay rupees 5,000 or whatever, in that case you are reiterating the fact that you are saying confidently that the past help was not gratuitous. Gratuitous in the sense the other party did not do it for out of gratuity for free. Okay, by paying rupees 5,000 you are saying that that was not gratuitous or not done for free. For that past help I am paying back. So there is a mutual consideration. That is what the point here says. In the event of the services, if there is, you need to read this clearly. But in the event of the services being rendered in the past at the request of the desire of the promiser. In the past, a promiser has requested to do some help. Okay? You have done that help. And the promisee now says, I'll pay rupees 5,000. In that case, he is saying that this act was not done out of gratuity. I mean, that's not done for free or out of gratuity. By paying, there's a mutual consideration here. So that's the point. Okay. So consideration may be past, present, or future. In case of past consideration, the past help can be motive for the future promise made. That was one point given over here. And in the event of this past services rendered at the request of the promiser, by promising to pay subsequent consideration, we are saying that the past help is not done out of gratuity. Okay, the moment you promise to pay something for the past help, you agreeing to pay something itself says it's not made out of gratuity. Okay, because I requested the services in the past, he has provided, so it's my responsibility to pay back rupees 5,000 to him. So by making this promise, you are saying that it is not made out of gratuity. So that's the point essence over here. And then here there's an example. A performed some services to B at his desire. Yes, at his desire, consideration. For consideration, desire of the promisee is the important. Okay. After a week, B promises to compensate A for the work done by him. It is said that the past said to be a past consideration, and A can sue B for recovering the promised money. Yes, past, there is a concept of past consideration. So even though for this rupees 5,000 there may not be a present act, the past act can act as a consideration, and the party who has provided that services in the past can sue B in the court of law. Okay? And then consideration need not be adequate. Fifth point is consideration need not be adequate. So here usually whenever there is a consideration, we usually think the consideration must always be adequate. Adequate means if you have provided services of rupees 100, okay, then you always expect rupees 100 to be given, nothing less than that. So this will be our usual ideology whenever we hear the terminology consideration. But the law says no. There might be chances that for rupees 100 services rendered, consideration given is only rupees 50. Just because the consideration is less, you cannot say that the contract itself is invalid. Okay, if both the parties are happy to perform the contract at the lesser price than its actual price of 100, then we are good, that can be considered to be a valid contract. But when one of the parties says, I provided service rupees 100 worth services only for rupees 50 out of undue influence, coercion, fraud or misrepresentation, then the, as we already know, when the contract is made using all these influences, the contract is voidable. That is, one party can cancel the contract. Okay, so that's the point over here. The consideration need not be adequate always. Okay, there are chances that contract is made at lesser, for the lesser price than the actual one. Consideration need not be of any particular value. Always you cannot say that this should be consideration, value of the consideration and all that. Okay, it need not be approximately equal. Always for rupees 100 you need not expect consideration of rupees 100. Okay, it approximately, for example, if you have read a contract and you saw the market value of that particular contract is of that particular service is rupees 1 lakh, but actually the contract is entered for rupees 50,000, straight away you cannot come to a conclusion that this contract is not valid. If both the parties are happy to do contract at that price, then we are good. Exchange, it must be something which the law would regard as having of some value. There should be some value. Law is not saying you enter into a contract for free and all that. Law should see some value, but not need not be equal value always. Something in return need not be equal to something. Okay, it may be noted in this context that Section 6, Explanation 2 to Section 65 states that an agreement to which the consent of the promissory is freely given. Free consent is important here. When that performing rupees 100 worth services for rupees 50 is done out of free consent, we are good. The consideration is valid. But when it is done with the coercion and all that, then it's a voidable contract. But as an exemption, if it is shockingly less, the consideration, for example, rupees 100 worth services are provided for just rupees 1, and the other party alleges that this consent was not free, then it is inadequate consideration, and that can be taken as an evidence. Yeah, if rupees 100 worth services are provided just for rupees 1, the consideration is shockingly less over here, then the less consideration will act as an easy way to allegation. So that can be proper support for the allegation. Okay, if a particular party goes to the court of law and says, I've provided services worth rupees 100 for only rupees 1, this is not out of my free consent, when he shows the contract of rupees 1, decision is more likely to be favorable on the side of the other party. Okay, that acts as a support. So then X promises to sell a house of worth rupees 6 lakhs for 1 lakhs only. The adequacy of the price in itself shall not render the transaction void unless the party pleads that the transaction takes place under coercion, undue influence or fraud. So that is, consideration need not be adequate. Okay. And then performance of what one is legally bound to perform. Okay. Usually we see this. Someone is legally bound to do their duty. Okay, for example, usually in government offices, it's their responsibility to do registrations and all that. They're legally bound to do that. And we giving our consideration for the act which they are legally bound cannot be considered as a consideration. Okay, because it's the duty to do their job. We need not pay to them as consideration. Okay, here we have examples of paying some amount of money for a witness coming to the court and explaining the incident and all that. It's that he is legally bound. We need not pay any consideration to that particular witness. Okay, when he is already legally bound to do something, we need not pay consideration. Though we pay, it's not a valid consideration. For example, we have promised a witness that if you come to court of law and say something favorable to us, we will pay you rupees 10,000. Okay, witness coming to court and explaining the incident and facts, it's something which he is legally bound. Okay, we need not pay anything to him. So now this consideration is not at all valid. Actually, we need not pay. So this witness, if in case though we did not pay rupees 10,000, this witness can't go to court of law and sue, saying that they promised me to pay rupees 10,000, they did not pay. Though he go to court, the decision will never be in his favor because he is legally bound to come to the court of law and give the incidents and all that. That's one. And similarly, for lawyers, usually before the case gets succeeded and all that, we'll agree to pay some amount, rupees 10,000 to lawyers. And upon the success of that case, we did not pay over and above the agreed price. Already arguing that case, we have come to an agreement of rupees 10,000. After the success of the case, we need not pay anything in extra. Okay. Though if you have promised to pay something in extra but you did not pay, this lawyer can't go to the court and enforce this. They are upon the success of the case, they asked me to they promised me to pay something in extra but they did not pay. This way lawyer can't go to court of law because he is already legally bound to do that, legally bound to argue the case. Upon the success, we need not pay anything once already there's an agreement done. Okay, here that's an example. The two examples that we have seen, the witness, they say the performance of an act by a person who is legally bound to perform the same cannot be consideration for a contract. Hence, a promise to pay money to a witness is void, for it is without consideration. Hence, such a contract is void for want of consideration. Similarly, an agreement by a client to pay to his counsel, that is lawyer, after the latter has been engaged, means agreement, I'll pay rupees 10,000 for this case, everything is done. After that, a certain sum over and above the fee in the event of success of the case would be void, since it is without consideration. Okay. But where a person promises to do more than what he is legally bound, if he promises to do more than what he is legally bound, such a promise, provided it is not opposed to public policy, is a good consideration. If he has done exactly what he is legally bound, then any consideration paid to that would be void. But if he does something more than what he is legally bound, more than his capacity, then such a promise provided is not up, and that promise should not sound like a bribe. Opposed to public policy means something which is not good for the public. Okay, so if something sounds like a bribe and all that, then that is not that promise is not valid. However, when he has done something extra than what he is legally bound, then we can pay him a consideration. So, and then consideration must be real and not illusory. Illusory means it should not be kind of imagination. Here we have example like I'll discover a treasure by magic and all that are the illusory concepts. Okay, consideration of that sorts are not valid. Consideration must be real. It should be there should be possibility of performance. If it is legally or physically impossible, it is not considered valid consideration. There's an example. A man promises discovery of treasure by magic. And then we have consideration must not be unlawful, immoral or opposed to public policy. Yes, the contract itself says there should not be an unlawful consideration and all that. Only presence of consideration is not sufficient. It should be lawful. There should not be consideration like I'll give you drugs, cocaine and all that. That is not a lawful consideration, right? So if that sort of contracts are entered as a consideration, then it's outright void. Anything which is immoral or opposed to public policy cannot be valued as valid consideration. A agrees with B to sell car for 2 lakhs. Here A is under an obligation to give car to B and B has the right to receive the car and payment of 2 lakhs. And also B is under an obligation to pay 2 lakhs to A. So here if you see everything is lawful here. Nothing is unlawful. Okay. So we have seen legal rules for valid consideration. It need not be adequate is one. Consideration must be lawful. It must not be unlawful. Okay, it can be past consideration as well. We have seen various legal rules for this. Okay, and now suit by a third party to a contract. We'll see. What did we say? The ground rule is that there can be a stranger to consideration. but not stranger to a contract. We've seen Chinaya versus Ramaya case where the old lady has given the property. Consideration is coming from the old lady. The maternal uncle outrightly need not pay any consideration, but not stranger to a contract is what we've seen. And also, what did we see? The third party cannot sue against the contract. Only parties to the contract can sue each other. We've seen. But there are few exceptions for this. In some cases, even a third party to the contract can enforce a contract. We'll see what is that. That is a suit by a third party to a contract. Even a third party to a contract can sue sometimes in an exceptional cases. Usually, third party to a contract cannot sue. We'll see what are the exceptions. So, the first line says, though under the Indian Contract Act 1872, the consideration for an agreement may proceed from a third party, the third party cannot sue on contract. Only a person who is party to a contract can sue on it. Thus, the concept of stranger to consideration is valid and is different from stranger to a contract. Here we have an example. P is indebted to Q to sell his property to P has to give some amount to Q. Okay. This P sells some property to R. Okay. Now what did R say? Okay, P, you've sold property to me. Anyways, I'll have to give some amount to you because you have sold the property. Instead of that, I'll directly repay your debt to Q. This was the contract made. Very simple. P has to give some amount to Q. Okay. P at the same time, P sold his property to R. So for selling the property, P receives something from R, right? What did R say? Instead of giving money to you, I'll settle the debt with Q. So this was the arrangement made. Now, who are the parties to the contract for this debt? For this debt, it's P and Q. So now Q can file a case against P for getting that debt amount, but he cannot sue R. Okay, because R is a stranger here. This debt agreement is purely between P and Q, but just R said, out of the amount that I need to give to you against this property, I'll directly pay to the Q. Okay, so that's why parties to the contract are only P and Q. Q can sue only P for this debt, but he cannot sue R. Okay, that's the essence of this rule. There can be a stranger to a consideration, but not a stranger to a contract, and we cannot sue on the stranger to a contract. Okay, now therefore, this kind of stranger to a contract rule is called doctrine of privity of contract. So do not get confused when they use these types of term. Explain doctrine of privity of contract. It is very simple. There can be stranger to a consideration but not stranger to a contract. That is what doctrine of privity of contract says. However, we said there cannot be a stranger to a contract, and that particular stranger cannot sue or he cannot be sued. But there are exceptions. The first exception is in the case of a trust. In the case of a trust, what happens usually? For example, there is some ABC trust. ABC trust. Under this trust, they say for 10 people will provide some education or livelihood or whatever. Okay. Here the parties to the contract are ABC trust, and usually for trust we have trustees, someone who manages all this. Okay. Here parties to the contract is ABC trust. Okay. ABC trust says you'll have to, they're putting some amount with you, you'll have to take care of these 10 people, is what the trust says. Parties to the contract are ABC and trustee, and here these 10 people are kind of outsiders. This is strangers to the contract. But then, since it is for benefit of these people the trustee is formed, these 10 if the trustee doesn't pay the amount, these 10 people can sue the trustee. Though these are strangers to the contract, these 10 people can sue the trustee. So in the case of a trust, These 10 people are beneficiaries, right? A beneficiary can enforce his right under the trust, though he was not a party to the contract between the settler and the trust. Settler, okay, settler is nothing but we can say the trust and trustee. Okay, that's what it is. Beneficiaries can sue. And here, if you say that stranger to a contract cannot sue, we cannot see benefit to these people. So law has given these sort of exemptions wherever benefit of the people needs to be seen. In the case of a family settlement, you can say in the terms of the settlement are reduced into writing. Usually, you can say maybe taking care of the elders. So taking care of someone in the family. These kind of family settlements may be made. Okay? The members of the family who originally they may not be the parties of the contract, but if it is for the benefit of the others, just like in the case of the trustee, the beneficiary, in the case of family settlement, the beneficiaries or the for the benefit of that people, they can enforce the agreement. Okay, maybe there's an agreement between two family members, two brothers, that we will take care of dependents who are if A is a brother, B is a brother. B said, I'll give you some amount for the whatever, and you'll have to take care of the usual. I mean, this is something which is written. Okay, it should be written. Only then this is input. You should take care of the dependents, their medical cost. I'll pay you for their medical medicines or whatever, and you should take care of dependents. The contract is between A and B, right? B's consideration is to take care of A's consideration is to take care of dependents. B's consideration is paying rupees 5,000 for their medicines or whatever. So now these two A and B are parties to contract, but it is for the benefit of these dependents. These dependents can go to court of law and sue. Here, the doctrine of privity of contract doesn't hold good. This is an exception. Okay, because if we go by that principle, only A and B can sue each other. In that case, if no one cares, these dependents will be at. Again, it would be difficult for their livelihood. So, in that case, again, for the benefit of the dependents, this is given as an exception. In case of family settlements which are reduced into writing, the members of the family who originally had not been parties to settlement may enforce it. And in the case of certain marriage contracts or agreements, family settlements and marriage contracts, you can take the same example. A provision may be made for the benefit of a person. He may file the suit though he is not a party to a contract. Okay, even in the marriage contracts, maybe again the dependents case, both the couple promise to take care of the dependents. The dependents can sue or file against them, though they are not the party to the contract. And acknowledgement or estoppel. So by seeing the words, this is kind of a proper legal term. Estoppel is nothing but by using this term, law is giving a principle that a party originally says something, okay, agrees for something, he cannot again come back and say what I agreed is not valid. So by using this word estoppel, law is imposing a principle that by reading this example that will be even more clear. We'll just go through the example. Where the promiser by his conduct acknowledge himself as an agent, okay, of the third party. He says, I am the agent of the third party. It would result into a binding obligation towards third party. Very good example. L gives to M rupees 20,000. Why did he give? It's not a contract between them. Go and pay this 20,000 to N. Here M is an agent between L and N. Between L and N, he is an agent. So what did he says? M informs N that L gave me rupees 20,000 already to give it to you. That money is with me is what M says. Okay. He already acknowledged that rupees 20,000 is with me. I'll have to give it to you. Now, estoppel is a principle given by law. Now, M cannot go back and say, no, what is that rupees 20,000? No one has given me that 20,000. He cannot say that words because he has already acknowledged that I have 20,000, I'll pay it to you. So, by using this term estoppel, law imposes a condition on M. When you already agree that I'm an agent, you cannot go back and say, I never received 20,000, and all these statements cannot be made by you. Okay? Estoppel prevents this principle of estoppel prevents the party from saying opposite to something which he already agreed for. He already agreed for rupees 20,000 is with him and he'll give to N. Now he cannot say that there's no 20,000 with me, and all these words cannot be said when there's an acknowledgement or estoppel already made. That's the example. Now, though the parties to the contract are L and N, because L, instead of directly paying rupees 20,000 to N, maybe due to some uh, conditions, or he cannot give rupees 20,000 directly, so he put M as an agent in between. Okay, though the M is a stranger here, looks like it's an exception, right? N can sue M happily. Okay, and decision mostly will be in favor of N, because law already said when you acknowledge something, you cannot go back and say no, what I earlier said was not true, and all that cannot be made. Once he said rupees 20,000, I am holding that, he has to pay at any cost. That is acknowledgement or estoppel. Now, in the case of covenant running with the land, covenant is nothing but there will be some rules or whatever, maybe some taxes needs to be paid and all that sort of thing. The person who purchases the land with notice that the land is bound by certain duties affecting the land, the covenant affecting the land may be enforced by the successor of the seller. Okay? Again, A sold land to B. B paid some money, rupees 2 lakhs or whatever. But this land has a notice of payment of certain taxes or whatever. This particular land has got notice of taxes and all that. Once the land is sold, B agreed along with that notice, yes, this land has got some sort of payments to be made, I'll take care of that. That was the agreement. Okay. Now, because earlier taxes are outstanding by A, notices will go to A. Though the land is sold to B, notices will go to A. Now, since there's already condition along at the time of purchase, only B knows that there is some notice attached to this land, I'll have to take care of that. B already knows. So now, successor of A or anyone, the third party to that, can sue B when he doesn't pay that taxes or whatever attached with the land. So that's the when there is any covenant